If you're a fan of NASCAR, you may be familiar with the saying, "If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying," spoken by Junior Johnson. He said this regarding his creativity when it came to assembling cars to race. However, as a young boy, my parents taught me the opposite. Cheaters never win, and winners never cheat. From personal experience, I'd love to have a dime for every time I've seen people attempt to bend the rules in order to come out on top. An example that comes to mind, and one that grinds my gears, are Major League Baseball players that use performance-enhancing drugs, or PEDs for short, with the goal of unfairly building their bodies to elevate their level of play. This issue will never affect me personally, but as a lifelong fan of the sport, it bothers me to know that players will continue to cheat the system, altering the game I love. Major League Baseball already has major consequences for players caught using these substances. However, I favor increased penalties for athletes found guilty of using PEDs. First, I'll start with a little bit of background on the subject. Different time periods in the last 50 years or so reflect varying amounts of use and perception of performance-enhancing drugs. According to the Journal of Sports Medicine and Doping Studies, the issue of players using PEDs is separated into 4 different time periods: the early pre-steroid era, lasting from 1973 to 1982, the pre-steroid era, lasting from 1983 to 1992, the steroid era, lasting from 1993 to 2002, and lastly, the post-steroid era, lasting from 2003 to 2012. Each of these 10-year periods were determined by looking at statistics from each year and noticing trends in the amount of home runs hit by individual players, as well as the total amount of home runs hit by the entire league. As you observe each of the different time frames chronologically, as pointed out by the Journal of Sports Medicine and Doping Studies, during the early pre-steroid era, the MLB averaged a total of 2,896 home runs per season. Throughout the pre-steroid era, the league averaged a total of 3,443 home runs per year, followed by the infamous steroid era, which featured an average of 4,782 home runs hit per year. Finally, the post-steroid era, consisting of a grand total of 4,549 home runs hit per year. As you can see, the Major League Baseball average home run total per season saw a gradual increase of 547 home runs per year, transitioning from the early pre-steroid to pre-steroid era, followed by a whopping increase of 1,339 average home runs hit per season. Along with the shocking spike in power among major league hitters, the steroid era can be characterized by certain players such as Mark McGwire becoming unusually large, showing off unnatural gains in the weight room. Steroids and other PEDs have been officially banned in the MLB since 1991, and eventually league officials put 2 and 2 together to realize the correlation of these observations. 2003 marked the year which featured an introduction to strictly regulated testing, but that development could never reverse the effect PEDs have had on the MLB. From the early pre-steroid era to present day, the unethical consumption of performance-enhancing drugs has contributed to the booming success of many Major League Baseball players. Some of the famous examples include the all-time home run leader Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and one of my all-time favorites, Alex Rodriguez. Each of these players belonged to the prestigious 500 home run club, while Sosa and Rodriguez trekked into the 600 club, not to mention Bonds, who even surpassed 700 career home runs. 762 to be exact, as mentioned in ESPN's article, The Steroids Era. 762 home runs. For anyone who knows little about baseball, just know that number of dingers is absolutely absurd. Each of these juicers have tainted their legacies with a violation of the league's PED policy. However, that did not stop them from repeating the same offense in the future. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Alex Rodriguez, and many other players have served lengthy suspensions for giving themselves and their teams an unfair advantage. I believe stricter penalties should be introduced, not only because juicers give their team a greater chance of winning, but also their actions are selfish, and the spikes in their careers lead to substantial income that they can earn from their success. The article MLB announces stronger testing and harsher penalties for PEDs from NBC Sports talks about how a player's main goal isn't cheating to boost his team's success, but instead it's the potential cash reward leading them down this path. Some people may argue that giving your team an unfair advantage is reason enough for stricter punishments. However, I believe guilty players deserve heightened consequences due to extreme selfishness in a sport that's meant to be played as a team, solely to achieve extensive monetary gain. A great number of players have bent the rules using performance-enhancing drugs, but it has not gone unnoticed by league officials, as the MLB has taken progressive steps towards more severe punishments in the past couple decades. Even though I believe players should receive stricter penalties, there's no denying how far Major League Baseball has come in terms of combating their athletes' use of PEDs. Prior to the steroid era, players' use of performance-enhancing drugs was not much of an issue for the league. It wasn't much of a hot topic until the trend of unreal muscle gains, along with an unprecedented spike in offensive output from hitters, began to raise some eyebrows throughout the 90s. While researching, I learned from the Journal of Sports Medicine and Doping Studies that use of PEDs was officially banned in 1991. However, the MLB did not introduce a strictly regulated testing policy until 2003. Aside from the significant negative health effects of these drugs, with no required testing, what was going to stop these players in the 90s from breaking the rules in order to earn more money? The MLB improved from a non-existent testing regimen in the 90s to a required rigorous PED policy today. According to NBC Sports, as of 2014, each MLB season consists of 3,200 random urine tests across the league, in addition to 1,200 random blood tests. The first positive PED test will result in an unpaid 80-game suspension, increased from 50. The second violation will result in an unpaid 162-game suspension. In other words, a full season's worth of games, increased from 100. And a third will end in a permanent ban from the MLB. These punishments are already nothing to joke about. But I think the MLB can do better because it's completely unacceptable to unnaturally elevate yourself physically while other players grind day in and day out legitimately. I believe a player's first violation should result in an unpaid 162-game suspension. A second violation should result in a permanent ban from the MLB because it shows the player did not learn their lesson after a hefty punishment from the first offense. As much as I would like to see stricter punishments, I can't say I'm not proud of how far the MLB has come cracking down on PEDs. Life is not fair. We are all different. No one shares the same experience and nobody has the same opportunities as the next guy. That's why games such as sports and baseball were created. Games have rules, and abiding by the rules entitles everyone participating a fair chance to compete. All games are meant to be played fairly, but there will always be cheaters looking to bend the rules, such as baseball players consuming performance-enhancing drugs to elevate their physicality on the diamond. Different eras feature more rule breakers than others, but that doesn't make it okay. These players put their legacies on the line by making these choices, but some people will do anything to gain an edge over their opponent. The MLB has put up one hell of a fight to restore baseball to the way it should be played, fairly. Having said that, punishments for PEDs should be even stricter, considering how much there is to gain from getting away with it.